There you are. We have both meetings, both devices are recording. Welcome everyone to episode 2 of our Tuesday Talks and Tips. And we have with us today Lori Haynes, who is going to be our presenter. She lives in St. Joseph, Michigan, and is part of District 62, but she's also actually part of District 11. As a Toastmaster for 5 years, she just finished Level 2 of Visionary Communication and is patiently waiting for her club VPE to submit the Education Award in Club Central. Well, she says maybe not so patiently. And also, it may seem like, wow, what was she doing all this time? Well, she was working on her traditional DTM, which she intends to complete before the sunset. And as the lead pathways guide for District 62, she found that some clubs were doing well with pathways, while others were struggling. Lori noticed that some clubs were doing some things that really helped smooth the transition for their members. And that is what she's going to share with us tonight with her presentation on integrating pathways into your club meetings. Let us welcome Lori Haynes.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank everyone for joining us tonight to talk about integrating pathways into your meetings. Now, we all like a good story, so let's start with a story. A tale of two clubs. This is a true story. Club A, they were doing well with pathways. Current members were progressing through the program, finishing up the Traditional Education Program Awards, or working in both programs. New members were signing up for paths and giving speeches. The club was adding new members and thriving. Club B, on the other hand, things weren't going so well for this group. Current members were only doing Traditional Education Awards. They didn't know much about pathways. New members had no idea how to select a path or how to use base camp if they did have one. They weren't giving speeches. Members left the club. Which club is yours most like? I hope everyone is in a club like Club A and not Club B. But there are a few Club Bs out there. Perhaps the majority of us are in clubs that are kind of in between. We've made a good start in pathways, but we want to work harder to make it succeed during this final year of transition. And that's why tonight I'm talking about integrating pathways into your meetings. This is a great way to ensure pathway success in your club. Now you might be wondering, what is pathways integration? Simply put, pathways integration is sharing pathways experiences and information. Why do you want to integrate pathways? There's a number of reasons. It can help your members and guests become familiar with pathways. It encourages your members to adopt pathways and progress in the program. It can ensure your members continue to grow, develop, and reach their goals. And it can help your club reach your distinguished club program goals, all of which are important for us. Who integrates pathways? Everyone in the club plays an essential role in integrating pathways. The key really to successful pathways integration is sharing that pathways experiences and information in varied ways and as often as possible. And I'm going to go over a number of tips in different areas on how you can integrate pathways into your meetings and your club. Now, just so you don't think you have to write down everything, I do have a handout that has the tips that I'm covering that you'll be able to access after this webinar. And while I'm going through these, you may think of other ideas that we'd like you to share, because everything that works in our clubs, we want to make sure and share so that others can take advantage of them if they're useful for them. Now, one area where it's important to integrate pathways is in your club meetings. And here's some ideas of what you can do during club meetings. If you're the club president, you could have members share which path they have selected and why. And this is a lot of fun. As club president, I love checking the base camp reports and base camp manager and seeing if a new member or a current member has selected a path since the last meeting. Then during my president's time during the meeting, I'll say, well, Bob has selected a path. Tell us, Bob, which path have you selected and why? And it gives a chance for the member to share the path that they've chosen. I always ask, does anyone else have this path? If it's a new member, that can be really helpful, because then the member can see if there's someone else in the same path. It lets him know that he can contact that person or those people if he has any questions. And then guests hear the member talking about it. They don't know much about pathways, and that's okay, but they sense the excitement because we're all celebrating and we're all glad that the member has chosen a path. This tip is a really fun one if you're club president. Now, if you're the meeting Toastmaster for your club meeting, there's a number of things that you can do throughout the meeting. One example is in speech introductions, mention the path, level, and project when you do the introduction. And you could give a brief project overview, particularly in those upper levels where different paths have different projects. After speeches, you could share what the member will be doing next in that level. For example, if someone has just finished their icebreaker, you could share, next, Jennifer will be doing their evaluation and feedback project, where they'll give a speech and then repeat that speech, modifying it with the feedback. It lets the members who aren't quite familiar with what's going on in Pathways yet understand what's coming ahead for that member, and it might help that member as well, especially if it's a new member. After speeches, you could have the members share what they enjoyed about that project, what they learned or what was fun about that project, or even what was difficult about that project. If you have a member give their final speech in a level, you could have that member share project that they're looking forward to in the next level. Keep in mind as you talk to members about which path they've chosen or their upcoming projects, they might not be aware of it. So if you have a chance, it's good to have that on hand so that you can help them out. Another thing you can do, if someone is giving their final speech for level 2, you can briefly share about the Pathways Mentoring Program. And that can let members know about that optional program that they can take, they have access to after they complete level 2. Now, there were a lot of different things that the Toastmaster could do during the meeting. But even the Topicsmaster can help integrate pathways. You could have a table topic session centered around pathways. Maybe you have one where people share their experiences or share why they selected their paths. Or maybe you have them focus on how they solved problems and getting started with pathways. These are just a few suggestions. A table topic session centered around pathways might be something to do during an open house. Or maybe if you've just received a number of new members and they're all, and you need to introduce them to pathways all at the same time. If you're the general evaluator, there's something you can do too. You can briefly explain the Pathways evaluation form. You could share the different places where members can find evaluation forms, such as in the project and in that speech evaluations tile on the Basecamp homepage. Other things you could do during meetings, you could show short tutorials or live demos. You could show the how to evaluate tutorial. That's in that speech evaluation style. It's a great tutorial that talks about how to use the pathways evaluation forms, and you evaluate part of a speech. So you get a little bit of practice. You could do an online demonstration of selecting a path, either live or using slides. You could have a pathways Q&A session. Now there's just a few suggestions of some things you could do during the meeting. And I want to open it up if you have other suggestions. I'm going to cover more, but I've broken those down into officer roles. One of the first things you might be thinking is, okay, wait a minute, Lori. We have a tight meeting. We can't do all of that stuff. And that's true. But the point isn't to do everything every meeting. It's just slip in little things like this during your meetings. And then it helps the guests and your members become more knowledgeable about pathways and become more educated about it. It's hard for a lot of members to talk about pathways because they don't understand it. But by hearing different aspects of it every meeting, it helps them understand it more so that they can share information with other members and also with guests. I do want to pause if you have any questions or any other suggestions about what we've gone over. You can either unmute yourself and talk, or you could put it in the chat if that's easier. And then we'll go on to the next section. Now, a group of Toastmasters and no questions, I can't believe that.
Careful what you ask for. Lori, I have a very quick question that I've been asked myself several times, or I've observed. People get gung-ho about pathways sometimes, and they throw way too much information at guests. And you might actually be covering this later on, but if not, could you give some suggestions on what information can they share with guests rather than the history of pathways and all that?
Thanks, Michelle. That's a great question. Sometimes we do have a tendency to give guests too much information. I like to think of it as you want to give a guest a shrimp cocktail, not a double supersized Baconator Whopper super value meal, right? We just want to give them a little bit. One of the things I do in my clubs is I have a one-page sheet that just has a brief description of all the paths. And then Toastmasters has a couple of nice flyers. And you can edit those flyers to put your club information in. And I've got those in my Pathways resources, and I'll be sharing that link at the end of this webinar as well. So you do just want to give them a little bit. You don't want to tell them about all 65 projects or give them the whole project file because they don't know what all that means. And in fact, sometimes Toastmasters make the mistake of explaining the traditional program with the new one.
Pathways.
Unless they've been a previous member, your guest has absolutely no idea about CC and ALG and ALS. They don't really need to know that because it's confusing. Just talk about pathways and take it from there and the benefits that they can achieve in pathways and how it can transform their lives, just like the traditional program has done for us. Any more questions?
I was wondering, I thought that Q&A thing sounded nice, but I don't know if anybody in our club would have enough knowledge of pathways to do that. Maybe, can you do it with not that much knowledge, or?
Well, maybe you could start and find out what the questions are and then research them. So I would recommend take it one step at a time. Maybe start your question and A with, Does everyone have a path and know how to get a path? Maybe you need to start there, depending on the progress of where your members are. And then do a short one on how do you find your path? How do you open up those projects? Maybe just take it one step at a time. And it's okay to repeat stuff, because even if you've gone over something, either a member might have missed that meeting and didn't hear it, or they heard it, but it helps to hear it again so that they understand it and can remember it, either for themselves or if they're helping another member. So it's okay to repeat things. That's a great question, Mary.
I just have a comment, Laurie.
Yes.
I'm a Pathways guide, and I'm in District 9, and our club is 100% Pathways. And
All right.
We got DCM 10 out of 10, all Pathways. So just to know that what you're talking about is entirely possible. But commenting on what you said, Mary, what I recommend to clubs, and a lot of clubs in our district aren't where we are at, so totally liking the things that you're talking about. But one of the things I really recommend is that someone in the club, whether that's the VPE or another base camp manager, president or secretary, or someone who's more technologically savvy, if you will, becomes the Pathways expert and really works with the guide or someone in your districts who's really up on Pathways, and so they can answer those questions or has a go-to, but you have one person who's really bringing in that knowledge. That's one of the things that can be really helpful.
I think that's helped a lot of clubs getting started. We're kind of at the point in transition where we need to get more people on because we don't have a lot of time left. You could also look at the clubs in your area. If you look even at the dashboards, a DCP report, and there's a club in your area, you see they're getting a lot of Pathways education awards, then maybe reach out to say, hey, we need some help with Pathways. You guys seem to know what you're doing. Help us. Because if we work together, that's what Toastmasters is all about, is helping each other succeed. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and continue. I don't see any questions in the chat. Let's continue with the next set of ideas on integrating pathways. We went over some things you can do in your club meetings, and now I'll go over what officers can do, because officers play such an important role in our clubs, of course. If you're the club president, you could have members share their Pathways stories. You know, hearing how Pathways has helped us, just like Toastmasters in general has helped us, it's always a powerful tool to help and encourage people. You could share member Pathways progress. Some clubs are doing a chart. In one of my clubs, we do it online. We show a slide so we can see who's in which path. We also have an online tracker. And whether the club president does this or another officer, it is fine, but it's really important to share, because you're all going through Pathways together. Everyone's in different paths and everyone's in a different stage, but you're going through it together. The club president can help monitor member progress and the base camp manager, and make sure that you're helping the vice president education, because that role is such a heavy workload. If you are the club VPE, here's another, you could have Pathways questions and education sessions, and whether it's you or whether you have a Pathways expert or one of your other members, anytime you can get other members involved is always great as well. Now here's an interesting one. Encourage people who join at the same time to work together to advance through Pathways. If you have members joining around the same time, they could almost be a Pathways class, if you will. They could help each other. They're all going through it together. And in one of my clubs, we had a group do this, and it's almost a little competition, because they all wanted to get through level 1 at the same time. And somebody got behind because she couldn't come for a few weeks because of work, and now she wants to catch up because everyone else is in level 2. And they're encouraging each other, helping each other find a speech topic, and it's really become a bonding experience with them because they all started the same time and they're going through through it together. Some of them now are in level 3, and now the ones who are in level 2 are chomping at the bit to finish level 2 so they can get with the others in level 3. They're having a lot of fun with it. This also could be a way to get some of your members who may be a little reluctant. Maybe you suggest, hey, why don't you start with these people? The seasoned member can help the new members with meeting roles and meeting culture and signing up for things, and then they can all help each other with pathways. Another idea is to have group mentoring sessions to help get people started. I'm going to do that in one of my clubs because we had a number of people join in the last month and a half. So we're going to do some group mentoring sessions to help them. You could send out a tip of the week to help them. Do you know how to get to your path, or how to open your project? Or when something changes, just recently, the project's now open in a new tab. So send out a tip of the week so people don't think they're crazy when it opens up differently. You could have a Pathways Icebreaker Speechathon. Maybe you have a number of members that joined at the same time, and you want to have them all give speeches in the same meeting, or some new ones plus some seasoned members who are just starting. Celebrate and make it fun. Show member progress, either via a chart or online tracking. And there's a lot of ways. There is a Pathways chart, which has been on back order for about the last year, almost. Hopefully that'll come back, or make your own chart. Do it online. Some clubs are doing it on their tents, their table tents with the member's name. They're putting people's paths on there and their levels that they're progressing. There's any number of ways that you can track that. Ask ideas from your members. Giving recognition, of course, is so important. Either when paths are selected, you could do a certificate when members have selected paths. I think that would be especially fun in a new club, because you could really celebrate as everyone gets on pathways. You could give the level completion certificate when someone finishes a level. In some clubs, they give a little gift as well, maybe a Toastmaster's tote bag or a pen. Path pins, ribbons. You know how we love our ribbons in Toastmasters. Or maybe your club does something special, a different type of gift or a different type of celebration. Make sure to have regular celebrations. Now, if you're a VP membership, you could have a Pathways themed open house. We did this at one of my clubs. The person who was going to be a Toastmaster loves superheroes. What he did is we had some of us pretend to be superheroes, and we talked about which paths those superheroes would pick. It was Wonder Woman, Superman, Batman, Iron Man, Captain America, and I was Wonder Woman and Iron Man because Wonder Woman was sick that night. Imagine the costume change. We didn't do costumes, but it was just a different way to talk about pathways. And we had a guest join right after that meeting. You could do Wizard of Oz, you could do Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones. You could have a lot of fun with that. Remember, it's okay to have fun with pathways. If you're VP membership, make sure the new members read the Navigator. Make sure to point that out because that'll give them information on pathways and give them information on about club information and meeting information as well. If you're the VP PR, you could write articles for your local media about pathways. And also when members receive education awards. That's great recognition for your club members, and it's great recognition for your club. Anytime your club can be in the paper or local media, that's a chance for someone to see it and to stop by as a guest. You could post member pathways experiences and progress on your club and district Facebook page. That way you're letting everybody know that your club is being successful and that your members are growing and progressing. If you're the club secretary, you're also a base camp manager, so you can help the president and VPE monitor member progress in pathways. Even the club treasurer has a role. You want to remind members to get those renewals in early so they don't lose access to pathways. We'll have renewals coming up soon at the end of September. And if they don't have their renewals in, they won't be able to get into base camp to access their path. Sergeant at Arms, at a lot of clubs, they're having copies of level 1 evaluation forms available. Some are doing the evaluation forms of all the level 1 projects because all of those projects are the same in all of the paths. Some are just doing the icebreaker project. But whatever works for your club. You want to also make sure that if you have some members who can't print at home, you could offer to have certain people designated as evaluation printers. We do that in one of my clubs. If my printer's broken, I know there's a couple people I can email to say, hey, I'll send them the form. Would you please print this out for me? So that way we want to make sure everyone's able to bring their evaluation forms for their speeches. And the club sergeant at arms can help make sure pathways information is in guest packets. Just a little bit, not too much. Now all officers, select a path. We've got less than a year to go. By now, if you're an officer, you really should have a path. Even if you're still working in the traditional education program, it's important. You're a leader in the club. Make sure you have a path. That will help you not only be a leader in your club, but then you have some experience and you can help the others in your club when they have difficulties. And you could at least give your icebreaker, even if you're doing advanced manual speeches. You should probably be able to do an icebreaker just off the top of your head. Reach out to club members who may have difficulties with computer technology. Someone mentioned that in the questions. You know your members and reach out to them. There is the option of the printed path if they prefer instead of the online, but make sure that they don't feel left out. And it's important, just as it always is, to get all members involved so that everyone is part of the Pathways journey. Okay, we're back to our questions screen to see if you have any more suggestions or questions.
Lori, just a quick one. I already responded to Doug. He was asking what to do. It's a little bit off topic, but you know how Pathways goes different directions. He was asking about what happens if he has unintentionally clicked complete, and the response, I'm sure you'll agree, is just there's no undo, just finish your project and then you're at par with your record. And somebody asked about the webinar recording. We will share this on the Pathways discussion forum. If you are not a member of the forum, then you can apply or request to join. I've put the link on the chat. And so far, that's all I've seen.
All right, great. Thank you, Michelle. Any other suggestions or questions from anyone? I'm sorry, were you?
Well, there's a question about how to check progress of each member in Pathways. I don't know if you want to answer that because that's a little bit lengthy.
It is. I'll address it briefly. There are some reports in the Base Camp Manager. And if you are a Base Camp Manager, either President, VPE, or Secretary, log in under Base Camp Manager. And I like to use that, go to Member Progress. I like to use that second report. When you click on it, you can refresh it. It does take a long time to refresh. So refresh, go make coffee, go feed the cat, go walk the dog. By the time you've done all that, it might be ready. It's kidding, but not by much. It does take a long time. And if you go to view details, you can actually, another screen will open up and that'll give you specific detail on who has which path You could even see when everyone selected their path. Now, why would you want to do that? Something that you could do, you could have a special little competition and say that you have a prize for everyone who downloads up their path before the next meeting or by the end of the month. You could have some fun with that, and you're able to see when everyone specifically has downloaded a path. But that will give you information on which path they have. As a Basecamp manager, you can go in individual member transcripts to see which projects that they have marked complete. Some clubs are also using a tracker. We use one at a couple of my clubs. It's online, and either the VPE fills it in or the members, so everyone can see where everyone is, and it helps the VPE and the officers plan for the DCP program because you have a sense of where everyone is. So there's a number of things that you can do for that. I hope that answered part of that question with that. Any other questions or suggestions? Are there other things that you guys are doing? Because, this is just some ideas. Just like Toastmasters meetings are very different everywhere, ideas and what we can do is as varied as well. And anything we can share to help each other is great.
Yeah,
Laurie,
my VP of Ed in my club, what we do is we meet at 6:30. She comes in at 6:30, and anybody who has any questions, she is there for half an hour to go over it.
That's great.
There are a lot of times where people have problems in pathways, and they can come in and get help.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Taking care of your members.
Yeah, and Laurie, I think Ravindra has a question or a comment.
All right.
yeah, Laurie, good. This is Ravindra here from Oman. I have been appointed as the Pathways Champion or Pathways Chair Committee in my division, and I'm supposed to take continuous workshops for the officers as well as the members. My question is, I am not an officer in any of the clubs as of now, but how do I get access to the Basecamp manager, especially when I'm taking workshops for the officers or the Basecamp managers? Is there a way out to get the access to the Basecamp manager?
Now, you do have to be either president, VPE, or secretary of a club to be Basecamp manager. But if you're helping them with it, you could help guide them as far as sit down with them and help them so that they understand their role and so that they can see the options that they have. Just like in regular Basecamp, there's tutorials. There are in the Basecamp manager section as well. And so you can sit down with them and help them. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I agree. But then in a workshop, wherein I have about 13 club officers, which means around 40 club Basecamp managers in a group whom I am going to train them, or I'm going to take a workshop, walk them through the Basecamp activities. So in that case, does TMI allow any special officers or special access to the Basecamp manager, Basecamp for others?
Unfortunately not. It is restricted to whoever's marked as those 3 offices or officers in Basecamp. Perhaps you could pair up if there's one that and you could work together, and that person could provide some screenshots for you. Perhaps you could do something like that. Find out who has access to it and who is familiar with it. There's not actually a lot that Basecamp managers have to do in the Basecamp manager program. So getting them very familiar with Basecamp and how people progress through their paths and their projects is going to help them with the majority of what they're going to do as an officer, whether they're a Basecamp manager or not. Because they might only need to go into Basecamp manager whenever someone has completed a project or completed a level and submitted that request. or maybe occasionally to check the progress. And if they use a system such as Free Toast Host or Easy Speak, they might be tracking progress a different way and not as much in Basecamp. So
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
I have a couple of comments. One is just a follow-up to what Barbara said. I found that I or someone else is available after every meeting with a computer to take people through. And what's really helpful, especially when people are not as familiar with the computer, is not just showing them, but actually having them do it. And some people, it's like, okay, do it again, do it again, do it again until they get it. That's really, really useful. Also, if you have someone who wants to learn the computer but isn't so computer literate, you might have them at the beginning have to help them fill in the forms and access things and do a combination of printing out their project for them to work and having them do some online. That really helps. The second comment has to do with what you were saying, the chart and DCP. One of the things that we do with the DCP program is we actually have people raise their, well, you know, basically say, I'm going to get my level 1 this year, or I'm going to get my level 3. So they're saying that, and then that again will engage them because they're helping the whole club to reach our club goals. And they raise their hand, and then the VPE knows, okay, this is how I have to plan these speeches to get this person through level 3, or last year it was we had to get someone all the way through level 5.
Right, right. And that's great because then it's everyone that's in the club part of the DCP, not just the officers.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I think that's really key.
Yeah.
I like to, when I'm if I'm doing an update on the DCP, not just say, okay, we got a point because of this goal. I'll say we reached this goal, we have this point because so-and-so and so-and-so did their CC, and you know, so-and-so and so-and-so joined. Keep saying that the names with that, so that way they feel a part of it, because it is because of them. It's not just because what the officers do with that. Something else that you could do if someone's having difficulty, sometimes I'll get an email and I started using Zoom, and I'll make a quick little video to show them. And now I've made some extras and I post it up, and we have a web page and we're putting it on there. So that way as we get new members, there's got a little video that tells them how to get started, how to open up Basecamp, how to find their path. So you could do some custom videos or do it on an ad hoc basis whenever someone has a question. That way maybe you're rushing out the door after a meeting, someone has a question, but you can still help them. We can use technology in various ways to help our members.
I have a question for anyone smart soul that is present tonight. What about someone in the exec committees who actually actively resist jumping into pathways, not even choosing a path yet, and not even talking about pathways in meeting? How do you address the mentality?
Now that one's always fun because we've had people resistant and some people were just hesitant. But we're kind of getting to the point where it's a point of no return type of thing. I've tried to be gentle with those people. Maybe not quite as gentle as they're an officer, because if they're an officer, they really do need to help lead. With one person, they didn't want to do it because they wanted to do the traditional education program. So at least I understood a little. But I explained that I needed them a little bit to understand pathways, because if there's a guest sitting by them and ask them, well, what happens when I join? I told the person point blank, do you want that person to join? Do you want them not to join because you don't understand pathways a little bit? I think it might depend on the person's personality and then your experience with them. Because we all know there's people we can push a little bit, and there's people, sometimes you just have to leave them alone, and you hope that they come. You hope that they, especially if you get everyone else in the club, sometimes that helps those people, because now there's this rolling stone almost, and there's this energy and there's excitement, and wait a minute, they're getting left behind. They don't want to be left behind. And as much as I hate to think that it's going to happen, there are going to be people who just won't. Sometimes with some people, the more you try to push, the more of a wall they put up on there. So I think take that as on a basis. Hopefully everything else with pathways will hopefully overshadow their negativity, and hopefully they'll come along. Does anyone else have any strategies on that?
Pay attention to what their communication style is.
Yes.
And match that. So if they're analytical, give them data and facts. If they're more social and interactive, tell them stories, such. So really pay attention to that, and really listen to them and what their objection is. Is that they're scared of the technology. You don't have to do technology with pathways. You really don't. And I just present it as, it's just like the CC and the CL and all the advanced manuals, plus much more, all rolled into one. I mean, that's basically what it is. It's the educational curriculum, and we really haven't lost anything. So try to figure out what their objection is and specifically address that and come up with some solutions for them.
Right, that's great. Try to reach them where they are when you can.
Well, in that specific case, the officers who has been around for 20 some odd years, actually boost that they are afraid of change. And so the influence they have on new members is really bad. And at the same time, they ask new members and all of members as well, and senior members as well, to join in, but they themselves don't do it. So it says a big gap.
I agree with that, and I think even though Pathways is going really well, there's still a few people that are quite resistant. I do want to go ahead and move on because we want to make sure that we end on time, as we like to do in Toastmasters. And now I've got some tips on what members can do. We've talked about in meetings, we've talked about roles that officers can play, but what about members? We can give feedback badges in base camp to everyone. And I'm not sure a lot of people know how to give feedback badges, but that can be an important way that we can help encourage people to go into base camp, because they need to go in to see what badges or comments have been left for people, especially since there's no notification when someone has left something for you. This is always important in Toastmasters. Share your Pathways experiences and successes. Help club members get started and keep going. Even if they give their icebreaker, don't assume they're okay and they don't need any more guidance. Because if they don't know how to close that project out, they can't access those next two projects. And so it's important to follow up and help them keep going. I always recommend that when you have mentors for new members, help them get through level 1. Don't just do the 3 speeches like we were used to with the CL. Help them through all of the projects in level 1 and to submit that level education, that level completion request. Because usually if people can get through level 1, they're comfortable with the system, they understand the quirks, and they know how to close out projects and keep going. So that's really important. If you're talking to guests, find out why they're interested in Toastmasters and share how Pathways can help them. Find out what other clubs are doing, either in your area, your division, or in your district, or worldwide. We've got that great Pathways discussion forum Facebook page where you can get help and ideas from around the globe. See what might work for your club. And we always want to ensure that no member is left behind. As much as possible, we want everyone to join us in Pathways and to continue developing their communication and leadership skills. We just had a question session, so I'm not sure if we need one right now. I'll ask Michelle. Do we need another session right now?
Well, we don't have any questions that I see on the chat, so maybe you could just, if I think you had one other short segment, or is this it?
This is one last segment
Okay.
on this. I started out with A Tale of Two Clubs. And that was a true story. That was how they began Pathways. But let's check back in and see what happened with those two clubs. Club A, that was the one doing well with Pathways. Now it's almost a year and a half later. They're continuing to integrate Pathways, and this club is going strong. They had the second highest Club Pathways award total in their district. The club has great energy, and guests are joining at nearly every meeting. So they're a continuing success story. But what about Club B? What happened to Club B? Club B started integrating Pathways with some of the ideas that I've shared tonight. More members have selected paths, and several have completed Pathways Education Awards in multiple levels. New members are shown how to get started and being mentored now. The club is growing. Integrating Pathways can help all of our clubs succeed. And there's not just one way to do it. I've shared a lot of ideas, and hopefully that'll spark some ideas, either using some of what I've presented tonight, or you'll come up with ideas of your own as well to help integrate Pathways into your club. I wanted to give my contact information here if you'd like to reach me. That's my email address. And I have Pathways resources at this link, as well as I made a handout with these tips, and I'll put these links also in the chat as soon as I'm done here. But I want to make sure that you have a way to reach out to me if you'd like, or if you want to share that information or see what other resources are available. We do want to promo that a week from tonight, we'll have another session, episode 3, How to Pick a Path in Pathways. There's a lot of P's there, Michelle.
You bet.
I like it there. Michelle will tell us a little bit about what that's going to be there, but
Yes, thank you. And that is actually for next week, but I don't want to leave this week without first giving Lori a really big round of applause. So now you can all unmute yourselves. Let me just do that for you. I've just unmuted all of you. Let's give Lori a really big hand. That was really good. Thank you so much, Lori. And Lori has given her information. For next week, we will have none other than Presidential Citation recipient George Marshall. Many of you may have heard his name. He is, or was, because now it's past tense, he was the Chief Pathways Guide for District 57. And in case you're wondering, why does it sound familiar? District 57 was the pilot district, the first district where Pathways was tested out. And George Marshall helped to give feedback. Some of the improvements that we now have were based on feedback from District 57. He has created some kind of matrix for showing what are the areas where there's more leadership, or what are the paths where there's more communication. He actually has 4 levels, but I don't want to give too much information. As Lori said, you just give a little bit of a teaser. So make sure that you mark your calendars for next week, same time, same channel, meaning same Zoom link. And if you are not a member of the Pathways Forum yet, then you can click on the link that I provided on the chat. If you don't know where the chat is, look down or bring your cursor down below to the bottom of your screen, and then you will see several options. Click on chat and then on the right side of your screen, you will see something like in Facebook where you can type things. And if you want to type to everyone, click on everyone so your message will come out there. If you just want to type to myself or Lori, you can just find our names. And all the links that you see are clickable. So I think I've given enough information for next week. Now let us open the floor if anybody has questions or comments or suggestions.
Lori, I have a question.
Yes.
About everyone in level 2 does the introduction to mentoring. And then my understanding is there's a, I don't know if it's a project that becoming a mentor or about mentoring. Where is that? How do we do that? I haven't been able to find it. I can't see it as an elective anywhere.
No, it only becomes available to you once you've completed level 2.
Yeah.
And I was always told it was in the suggested education, but I just completed level 2. It's in my transcript, but it doesn't look like a project yet. And I haven't opened it yet because I want to grab screenshots.
Okay, it actually appears they've improved it a bit. At first, it used to be a blue tile on the right side of your screen. I think now they have it as 2 options. Do you now see it on your education transcript as well? Because before it would come out as a tile on Basecamp. It wouldn't appear on your education transcript per se.
It would come, you mean as one, like a 6 tile of those?
Yeah. It would be
once you complete it level 2?
Yes, it would be over, but I've done that like eons ago. 2017, that sounds so weird. Yeah, not 18, 2017. So I think a lot has changed, and it's hard for us to recreate it because we're now on, like, I'm on path 5, 7. So I don't see that anymore. So I think, Lori, where do you see? Oh, cool. There it is. There you are.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There you are.
I didn't see that earlier. I looked. As soon as I completed level 2, I looked on there, but it is there now.
Yep. There you are.
But sorry.
Thank you.
Can I interrupt?
Yes.
Yeah, this Pathways Mentor program appears only once, I think, in all your paths. Because once you're a Pathways Mentor program, it doesn't give you a second chance to become a second Pathways Mentor.
That's true. That's why I can't see it anymore, because I've done it and it doesn't show up again.
Even I can't see it in my profile.
Yeah.
That's how I learned.
But you could still do the projects again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I have done it over and over, but you just don't get that fresh suggested. Yeah. And there's a thank you to you, Lori, in case you didn't see it, from Elisa. She picked up a lot of tips to share with her club, and she will actively campaign for more members to join next meeting. Nice. Oh, you're from District 75. Kumusta?
Hello. Hello, Lori.
Apparently, I'm typing in another language.
Yes, my question is,
Yes.
I'm from a new club. We are just chartered 2 months before, and we lack of evaluators. So is there any criteria in Pathways to evaluate a speech? Suppose I am completed level 1, and so shall I evaluate of level 2?
Are you working through level 1 now, or are you? Because you were chartered, you said?
I have completed level 1.
All right, and there's that evaluation and feedback project, and that has some great information. It has a nice video in there talking about evaluation, where you could say, this is better, this is best. I think they could have done one more step. There's also, if you click on the speech evaluations tile, and it's in the upper right corner, on that tile, there's a how to evaluate tutorial. Make sure everyone watches that, because that has some great help on evaluating a speech, and it lets you even practice evaluating a speech, and you can compare your evaluation with what the narrator does.
So the members who completed that evaluation and feedback project will be able to evaluate any speech, right?
I'm not sure of your question.
The member who has completed the project will
Right.
be able to evaluate the speech of any project.
Yes, yes, because you're a new club. Some clubs do have guidelines that may be dropping a little bit because the evaluation is so soon in Pathways. Because you could evaluate after giving one speech or two speech or three speeches. And then they can evaluate anybody because that's their first time. If somebody's really nervous about evaluating, you could kind of co-evaluate. That person could fill out the form and have someone else do the speech if they were really nervous about it, about their first time. That could be an option that clubs could do to help support new evaluations. But, you know, no matter when you do it, your first evaluation is not going to be your best, just like our first speech, right? You're going to be nervous. You're not really sure what to do. It's your first time, but you have to dive in and start, and then you just build your skills from there.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Someone did mention about the mentoring was suggested, only not required. There's one project that's required in level 2 with mentoring, Introduction to Toastmasters mentoring. But you're right, that other mentoring, those other 3 projects are 100% optional. You can do it, you can not do it, but it's a great way to build your mentoring skills. Or you could do it later. Maybe you don't want to do it right now. You can do it at any time because as soon as you complete level 2, you have access to it. But it's up to you when or if you complete that.
Thank you so much, Lori. And we are down, as they say in basketball, last 2 minutes. So if anyone has a really quick question and Lori can give a really quick answer, go for it.
I'll put again the links for the handouts in case you didn't see it the first time. I just put it in the chat.
Thank you so much, Lori. And in case there's anybody here who is not yet a member of the Pathways Discussion Forum, I have posted it several times on the chat, and I have posted it once again. You will have to answer some questions because of so many spammers that try to get in. So we will ask you, do you want to join the forum? Are you a Toastmaster? And if so, what is your club? Because believe it or not, some people will try to say they're Toastmasters, but they get caught when they don't know what their club name is. Yeah. So if nobody has, we only have a minute. You have a very quick point. Who was that? Andre? You need to unmute yourself, Andre. Very brief 30-second comment.
Where can I find session 1? Recording?
It is in the Pathways Discussion Forum. We
Okay,
post all the recordings.
Okay.
Well, we've had one, and then this will be the second.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's no rule about not ending 30 seconds early. So again, thank you so much, first of all, to our presenter, Lori, and to everybody who cooperated. You were very quiet. There was full attention. Let's give everybody a big round and see you all next week. Thank you so much. And we will now stop the recording.